The church just updated their policy on individuals who identify as transgender in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and here's what you need to know about it. I'm going to walk you through the major points of this policy, what's changed, what the implications are for these members participating in church, and it includes things like preferred pronouns, preferred names, what ordinances you're eligible to receive, if you can attend Relief Society, how to use restrooms, and a whole lot more. The basic premise of this policy seems to be wanting to bring more consistency to how the church ministers to individuals who identify as transgender. In the past, these complex cases were sometimes handled in different ways as local leaders counseled with their stake and area presidencies. Now they're evening the policies across the board. From what I can tell, the other big takeaway seems to be clarifying policies around social transitioning versus surgical or medical transitioning, and I'll show you what I mean. You can find the entire new policy in the General Handbook in section 38.6.23, and there's also a supplemental document called Guiding Principles for Local Leaders that you really don't want to miss, because that's where they get more specific about some of the general language in this policy. This section in the handbook starts off by first emphasizing that gender is an essential characteristic of the plan of salvation and is defined as biological sex assigned at birth. They comment how this is a complex issue and all of God's children should be treated with compassion and sensitivity. The church also does not take a position on the cause of people identifying as transgender. All of this introductory material right here is pretty similar to the previous policy. Here's where they really start to differentiate and clarify some things. Ordinances are administered based on a person's biological sex at birth, including baptism, priesthood ordinations, and temple ordinances. Then it links to these different updated sections of the handbook where it clarifies that someone who surgically, medically, or socially transitions must receive first presidency approval to be baptized. Transitioning will result in some church restrictions, meaning a socially transitioned individual will not be able to receive or exercise the priesthood, receive or use a temple recommend, and will not be able to serve in some church callings. That is a lot right there, so I'm going to try to explain it the best way I know how. The church defines surgical, medical, or social transitioning as intentionally attempting to present as anything other than the biological sex assigned at birth. This may include changing dress, grooming, names, or pronouns. According to my interpretation of this policy and what I can surmise from this, here's how it breaks down. A person experiencing feelings of discomfort around their gender who does not socially, surgically, or medically transition and who's worthy can fully participate in all aspects of the church and receive all ordinances of salvation and exaltation. This is the same standard for all non-transgender members of the church. An individual who socially transitions may be baptized if they receive first presidency approval, but they do not participate in other ordinances. They are also not to serve in certain callings. If you're already a baptized member of the church when you transition, the baptismal ordinance still stands, but you will no longer be able to attend the temple. As a baptized member of the church, transitioned individuals are welcome to attend sacrament meeting and participate in the church in other ways. They should counsel with their local church leaders for exactly what this participation could look like. As far as what those callings are, that can be found in the Guiding Principles document that I mentioned that is super important, where it clarifies that transitioned individuals are not to be called to fulfill gender-specific roles. This would include roles like the Relief Society president, the Elders Quorum president. They are not to be called as teachers, and they're not to be called to work with children or youth. So the primary, the young men's program, the young women's program. From what I can tell, this does leave open the possibility for those individuals to serve in callings within communications, welfare, music, activities, technology, and other specialist callings. I'm going to get back to this Guiding Principles document because there are some really important pieces of information to understand here about implementing these policies. But back to the handbook itself, it clarifies that members who transition, but then later on decide to transition back, can enjoy all of the privileges and participation in the church. It also includes an interesting statement that because laws vary from place to place, if leaders have questions about what they're legally allowed to say or do, they can consult a helpline. I'm giving you a lot of just straight logistics here, but you really do need to read the actual policy itself because it emphasizes in all of these sections that implementing these policies and ministering to these individuals should be done prayerfully, in counsel with other leaders, and done with the utmost sensitivity, compassion, and dignity for all persons involved. Now let's dive into this Guiding Principles document for local leaders because it contains the information about preferred pronouns, preferred names, gender-specific activities, overnight activities, callings, and restrooms. Again, the first thing they emphasize is to be sensitive, prayerful, and counsel with others before making major changes. So preferred names and pronouns. Membership records of the church reflect biological sex at birth. If someone has a preferred name, it can be notated on the membership record. However, the church is not dictating how preferred names or pronouns should be used. That's left up to the individual, the family members, the church members. I think it's really interesting. It says that local leaders should not determine or prescribe how members address an individual. This can go both ways because it means a bishop can't declare unilaterally that we all now have to use so-and-so's preferred pronouns, and it also means that a bishop can't unilaterally declare that we have to use so-and-so's name given at birth. This is something that needs to be done with sensitivity and on an individual basis. Okay, gender-specific activities and meetings. If you are someone who identifies as, for example, a transgender woman, could you attend Relief Society or Young Women's? According to the Guiding Principles document, for the most part, the answer is no. Exceptions can be made if they adhere to the guidelines in this document, and the request must be approved by the area presidency. The same goes for individuals who might identify as a transgender man and would like to attend, for example, Elders Quorum or Young Men's. Overnight activities. If you are someone who identifies as a trans woman and has socially transitioned, could you, for example, attend girls' camp? According to these guidelines, the answer to that would be no. For overnight activities that are for a specific gender, individuals attend only the camps that align with their biological sex at birth. This includes things like girls' camp, priesthood camp, young men's, high adventure, any other overnight activities of that nature. Overnight activities that are not gender specific, like Trek, for the Strength of Youth, YSA conferences, youth conferences, there is a little bit more flexibility. An individual who identifies as transgender may attend these activities, but if they've surgically, medically, or socially transitioned, they should leave the activity at night. Church restrooms. Can a person who identifies as transgender and has socially transitioned use the restroom they feel is more in line with their identifying gender? The church's response is, it depends. The principles the church wants to emphasize here is safety, privacy, respect, and dignity for all members of the church. So the church suggests that the preferred course of action is for these individuals to use a single occupancy restroom when available. Obviously, many church buildings don't have single occupancy restrooms. So the church does provide some other options, but I also wonder if this means that going forward, the church may pursue including more single occupancy restrooms as they build more church facilities in the future. If no single occupancy restrooms available, the individual could use the restroom that aligns with that individual's biological sex at birth, or they could use the restroom that corresponds to the individual's feeling of their inner sense of gender, with a trusted person ensuring that others are not using the restroom at the same time. Once again, the main principles being safety, respect, dignity, privacy for all members. This is a complicated issue. And I'm sure the church has spent years prayerfully considering all of these cases that have come before them before implementing church-wide policies so that they can support the church's unchangeable doctrine while still allowing for sensitivity for members of all kinds. I support the church's doctrine of the family, and I sustain church leaders in implementing new policies, but I get that this can be challenging, and so I'd hope that everyone takes to heart the counsel in these policies to pray about this. I know I'm going to. And we also always need to be remembered to treat God's children with compassion, respect, and dignity, no matter who they are. If you want to learn more about these changes, you can read them at the church newsroom.